It was a cold winter night, somewhere deep in the mountains of Colorado. A lonely road stretched through the dark forest, a black ribbon cutting through a world of tall trees and thick, rolling fog. The wind whispered between the branches, creating a haunting sound that echoed through the silence. Michael had been driving for nearly 5 hours. His eyes were heavy, burning from the strain, and the road ahead seemed to go on forever. There were no towns, no signs of life, and his phone had completely lost its signal hours ago. Just when he started to accept that he might have to sleep in his car, he saw something cutting through the dense fog. A faint, glowing sign. As he drove closer, the shape of a large building slowly materialized from the darkness. It was an old hotel, a silhouette against the gloomy sky. A neon sign flickered weakly above the entrance, spelling out a single name: Blackwood Hotel. The place looked almost abandoned. Yet a single small light glowed from within the lobby, a beacon in the oppressive dark. Micah parked his car and stepped out into the freezing air. The silence was absolute, almost unnatural. He pushed the heavy wooden door open, and a small, tarnished bell rang out, its chime startlingly loud in the quiet. Inside, the lobby looked like a time capsule. Everything was old and covered in a thin layer of dust. Ornate wooden furniture filled the room, and a grand, cobweb-draped chandelier hung from the high ceiling. Behind the long front desk stood an elderly man, impossibly still, dressed in a worn, dark suit. As Michael approached, the man slowly looked up, his face cracking into a thin, unnerving smile. "Welcome to Blackwood Hotel." A strange chill ran down Michael's spine, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. "I just need a room for the night," he said, his voice sounding small in the vast lobby. The old man nodded slowly and pulled out a heavy, old-fashioned metal key from a drawer. "Room 214, he said, his voice raspy. Michael took the key, its cold metal a shock against his skin. Just as he turned to walk away, the man spoke again, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "There is only one rule in this hotel. 2. Michael stopped and looked back. "Never leave your room after midnight." Michael managed a nervous laugh. "Why, what happens after midnight?" But the old man didn't answer. He simply stared at him, his smile gone, his eyes dark and empty. Unsettled, Michael made his way up the creaking staircase to the second floor. The hallway was long and dimly lit, the lights flickering as if struggling to stay on. The old wooden floorboards groaned under his every footstep. He finally found room 214 and unlocked the door. The room itself was simple, but felt comfortable enough. A bed stood in the center, a small writing desk sat by the window, and a door led to a small bathroom in the corner. Michael dropped his bag, the sound echoing slightly, and collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful sound that seemed to wrap around the hotel. Before long, the weariness took over, and he began to drift into a deep sleep. But sometime later, he woke up with a jolt. He heard something. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing down the hallway. Step, step, step. Michael glanced at the clock on the bedside table. The glowing red numbers read 12:15 a.m. He remembered the old man's stark warning. Never leave your room after midnight. The footsteps stopped right outside his door. Michael held his breath, his ears straining in the silence. Then came a knock. 3 slow, distinct knocks. Knock, knock, knock. His heart began to pound in his chest. A woman's voice, barely a whisper, seeped through the door. "Please, ... please help me, ... Please." Michael froze, every muscle tense. The voice sounded terrified, laced with desperation. "Someone is chasing me," she cried softly, her voice trembling. He hesitated, his mind racing. It could be a trap. But what if she was really in trouble? Against his better judgment, his curiosity, or perhaps his conscience, got the better of him. He crept to the door and slowly, carefully, turned the handle. He pulled the door open just a crack, then wider. The hallway was empty. There was no one there. He stepped out, confused, and looked down the long, dim corridor. And then he saw her. At the far end of the hallway stood a woman. Her long, dark hair covered her face, and she was wearing what looked like an old hotel uniform. "Are you okay?" Michael called out, his voice shaky. The woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were completely, terrifyingly black, two empty voids in her pale face, and her mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Suddenly, every light in the hallway went out, plunging him into absolute darkness. A wave of pure panic washed over Michael. He spun around, scrambling to get back into his room, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, the lock clicking into place. He was trapped in the hallway. Then, one by one, doors along the corridor began to creak open on their own. Trim stood silent figures, their forms barely visible in the gloom. Guests, dozens of them, all staring at him with the same empty, black eyes. Net. Horrifying moment, Michael realized the truth. No one ever leaves the Blackwood Hotel. They only check in, and they stay forever. The next morning, the sun rose over the Colorado mountains, but its light never quite seemed to reach the hotel. Another car pulled up to the entrance. A weary traveler, lost and looking for a place to rest, walked into the quiet lobby. The old man behind the desk looked up and offered the same thin smile. "Welcome to Blackwood Hotel. Okay?" The traveler asked for a room. The man handed him a key. Room 214, and somewhere in the long, dark hallway upstairs, a faint, desperate scream echoed through the building. But down in the lobby, the new guest never heard it at all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into darkness.